retired military generals to write a rollout program to normalize their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm just saying this as a statement of facts on the record. I don't care what somebody do in their bedroom as long as they ain't trying to do it in the bedroom with me.
Mm.
Oh, that ain't my business. But the reality of it is the influence on the children is the problem,
Absolutely. It
right?
was
Because
never lumped. It was never to par. That was never lumped with children initially. That's how they got it in. They slid it in under the guise it's an adult. You know, you accept these are minorities that get
right.
subjugated to marginalization, what have you. And then they slowly brought that over and started to merge that in the educational system and start to open up clubs in high schools, LGBT clubs, and started to influence children through shows, adding that as a plausibility and a possibility that men and men should be together and children and girls and girls. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's now you watch doggone anything you watch, it's gonna be some fruity stuff going on that ain't kosher. You ain't supposed to be doing that on TV. They even got commercials now where you got men kissing each other in commercials.
Mm-hmm.
In the 60s, they would have been executed
Mm-hmm. And
because
also,
it
yeah.
was that much intolerance for that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, it was here, but now, like if you, because I'm by Mexico, Mexico now, when you watch we watch these movies and it's like telenovas, and you watch them, and they never use that because a lot of the Latin culture was based on bravado, like Africa. They didn't allow that kind of like men on men, women on women. Maybe women on women just as a more seductress kind of thing, but not so much men on men. But now when you watch telenovas, you're starting to see the implementation of homosexuality, a heavy implementation of homosexual men in a lot of the shows. And it never happened before.
Yeah. And somebody said like cartoons too. The first flamboyant cartoon character came on the USA Network at night.
Mhm.
And he used to be flying around with his cape and his butt cheeks hanging out.
Yeah. But also let's add to, when we talk about the social engineering of acceptance of that, we have to realize there's a chemicalization that came in with the crack generation, where many people don't know that women who were influenced under the influence of crack, and crack was a purposeful bioweapon that was created by the Willy Wonka system that was implemented into urban communities because they had already done experimentations with rats
LA.
and others and humans that showed that if a woman took crack even before she was impregnated, it causes it messes with the hormonal base in the pregnancy. And that's where you see a spike of all these homosexual brown men now, based on that introduction of crack cocaine, which literally switched the sexual disposition of the children chemically in womb during that time. So now we're starting to see years later what happens when you start to introduce certain chemicals. Believe me, they had already done experimentation. They had the patent for it. They knew what it did, just like the gay bombs that they were putting in Afghanistan that were changing the disposition of the men all through there. And
As as for the crack, the largest, if you go back to Behold the Pale Horse, William Cooper was
yep.
explaining how George Herbert Walker Bush was using his family's oil rigs that was not subject to search for the transport of cocaine in massive amounts into America. That was started in the early 70s. Contemporary with his transport of large quantities of cocaine in the 70s, UCLA is trying to find alternate uses for the substance, and that's where they developed what's called crack. Crack was developed by scientists in UCLA to make the effects or to enhance the potency of the cocaine when you smoke it in rock form.
Mm-hmm. Causing more addiction, quicker addiction to it because
Right. Now,
it was such a quick
with the
high.
culture of the 70s coming off the free love and all of that, and they was passing cocaine out in Studio 105, I think it
54,
was,
Studio 54.
up in New York,
Yep.
right? At
Great.
Playboy
Great.
had clubs all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
and they had these private parties. They used to call it nose candy. And you always knew that from the flyer that it was going to be available, because in there it'll say all candy available. So whatever floats your boat, right? Which takes us to the Cosby case when he was tricking with them ladies, giving them Quaaludes. We don't know in 2020, 2010s, or the 2000s period that it was standard practice of
They
people
all
back
gave
in the
Quaaludes.
70s.
Yeah, all of them. All
Now,
of them were using Quaaludes.
remember what Scarface told his wife in the movie?
What did he say?
Your woman's so polluted with Quaaludes, you can't even have a fucking baby.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so this was very common. And then they had the pills was tees and blues, which is t-shirts and blue jeans, uppers and downers. That was the 70s. Crystal THC was crystal meth.
Yep.
Right. All that stuff Trey been trying to figure out how to get it into the community, because we had only a fringe group of people, a small percentage that would participate in that. But when it became a money-making scheme and we was in poverty, this is where your Iran-Contra take off. Now, remember, George Bush and Ronald Reagan got in off of the freeing the hostages from Iran platform.
Right. Yes, I remember that.
Right. So, and when Ronald Reagan was the sitting duck president, the interim president waiting to take office, Iran's supposed to release a whole bunch of the hostages. Right. Most of us don't know that them hostages was in Arizona on an army base. They wasn't in Iran at all. They never was in Iran. But they used that footage from Arizona because Arizona is desert.
So it matched the terrain that they were trying to uniformly create a smokescreen for.
So they made a deal with the Iranian government. Now, most of us don't know Saddam Hussein at this time has just been put in power a couple years before this by the CIA in Iraq. He was the #1 U.S. ally in the Middle East up until Iran-Contra blew up over here. Why? Because Iraq and Iran was in a bloody war. America began to sell guns to Iran, the enemy. America was swearing they was the enemy too, but they was selling them guns under
that's America. That's their thing. They'll call you an enemy, but they'll give you all the weapons necessary. Right?
Okay, yeah. So they armed them to fight against the Iraqis. What blew the lid off was the Iraqis was fighting with the Iranians and found that they was using American-made weapons. Okay, so what happened on the heels of that, at this time, you got two detectives. One of them was the original investigator into Biggie case, Russell Poole. And the other one, I forgot his name, but he came to a public meeting and was trying to tell them the CIA was pushing this dope into the community. Okay, now, when they started investigating to find out, because he said it publicly now, it's on the public record that the police investigator is saying that the government is selling the drugs. They discover something called the Iran-Contra affair.
That's right.
Where they was bringing the drugs into America, selling them on the streets, using the money to buy munitions from the United States military to sell to Iran. That's the only connection with Iran and Contras, because they didn't even associate. The Contras is in South America. The co-defendant, the only one that got some real time out of the whole Iran-Contra affair, he didn't get arrested immediately. He got arrested a couple years later, named Manuel Noriega from Panama.
Yes.
The only trial in U.S. history that's classified as top secret.
That's right. They won't release that file. And
because in that file, they find out that George Herbert Walker Bush, director of the CIA, was the one who put Manuel Noriega in power, and he used Nicaragua.
Mm.
He was using Panama to transport drugs from Nicaragua into America.
And that's why Nicaragua had that weird rogue war at one point. It was probably stimulated by like us going in there causing a little bit of, so to kind of cloak it a little bit.
Right. So they had the Sandinistas and the Contras fighting each other in Nicaragua. So while this is going on, right, the American people is watching the trial or the Senate hearings in like 87. They thought it was going to stop George Bush from getting elected president.
Okay.
So they get caught selling drugs. Now, in the United States, there is a law. It's called a culpability law. If the government solicits you to commit a crime, and you commit a crime, and the government is your co-defendant, you can't be prosecuted.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Everybody with a dope case, their co-defendant is the U.S. government. Let that sink in. Because the government has been the ones bringing the dope in the whole time.
Distributing it, transporting it, delegating what locations to distribute it for, for whatever reasons. Yeah.
If we knew about the opium wars, right? This is what caused Mao Zedong to rise to power. The British was going into China, and they was creating what's called opium dens all over the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And wars broke out in the transporting of heroin or opium at that time. It wasn't heroin yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So then they had what's called the Opium Wars. The Opium Wars gave birth to something called the French Connection. The French Connection was transporting China white, but in the movie, I think it was cocaine. The cocaine don't come from France or Asia. It comes from South America.
Yeah.
And some of the islands produce the coca leaf too. Yeah. Right. Now, while all of this is going on, we over here oblivious. Walking around la-di-da in fool's paradise.
Because remember, most news, when you go abroad, you actually hear more news about your country than you'll hear from inside your country. So we're usually just like, we think have free speech and we can delegate and say things out loud and it's everything censored from inside and from outside.
The first time I found out about 9/11, it was a show on a Canadian channel called The Fifth Estate. It's like Nightline or Dateline over here. Uh-huh. And about 4 months after 9/11, they did a whole broadcast tracking down everything. That's the first people that I found out was telling us that the government was behind it and it wasn't no hijackers.
That's probably where we got the first leak. And then also the 7 Israelis, I'm not sure if there were 6 or 7 Israelis that were celebrating, that was on the news. And when 9/11 went down, all of the floors were Jewish companies, all got a heads up. Obviously, they got the insurance policy, the guy who bought the building right before it happened and got the insurance policy too. Okay. So that's when we found out they were probably the leak, because the person who said they saw the Israelis celebrating, that it was a woman, I think. She reported
they was
to
in the white van. They had jumped out the white van. Now remember, also white vans came into play in the transporting a massive amount of gold under the tunnels out of the World Trade Center. One of them,
when they got rid of all of they got they emptied out all of those gold places where they stored the gold.
Yep. So one of the vans, some kind of way was decommissioned in the tunnel, and they left it there, and it was still full of gold. I mean, they was in a hurry to get away. They didn't have time to switch the gold to the other vehicles.
Yeah.
So it was also a white van. Then there's another lady who did the controlled demolition investigation.
Oh yeah.
and she found the boxes of explosives, the video footage of from the garage from before it, like a couple of months before, they was doing midnight repairs all night long after the building was closed for like 3 or 4 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and she found the
the
boxes and all that. The
remember the accounts that the firemen, the policemen, the New York City cops, before they totally swept the internet, took it offline, the first thing they said is they heard the booms, the explosions at the base of the building. And these men would know, because there's no way that a plane would hit the top of a building and it could collapse an entire building, especially with all that steel. It would have to collapse from the base, like any other demolition in New York City.
Well, here go the problem too with the plane causing a crash, because the way that we don't know about the Empire State Building got struck by a Cessna back in like the 20s or the 30s. This was before the World Trade Center was built. So because of that, the World Trade Center was built to withstand a direct hit from an airplane on purpose. That's why it had an exoskeleton, and then it had an internal tube. Right? So if a plane did run into the building, then they say, well, the fuel from the plane melted the columns. No, it didn't.
No,
the fuel, jet fuel doesn't burn hot enough to melt steel.
Yeah. And when you see
thermite do.
Yeah, exactly. But when you see how it fell, you've seen any demolition. I'm a New York girl. You've seen any demolition. You kind of, sometimes you get to watch it. The way that the building fell was exactly how a full demolition happens. Nothing was non-uniform. It wasn't as ununiformed. Everything was uniformed in how it fell with any other demolition. Yeah.
You know, the first thing when I was watching it, when it was happening, I was like, it don't seem like the building should have fell like that. It seemed like the top should have tipped over.
It should have tipped over. It would have cracked over if it was normal, right? Yeah.
But then the next thing that got my attention that made me say, what the, was building number 7 that no plane hit.
And it collapsed.
And
I worked down there. So yeah. Yeah. And what's crazy is because you use the propaganda, because remember, they build the narrative, they control the narrative. So it's all mind control programming. You know, they perpetually say something over and over again, show you several scenes, tell you what you need to think, which, remember, Richard Pryor said when he was cheating on his girl, he was like, you gonna believe me or you gonna believe your lying eyes? Okay. You know, so people were seeing things that they knew very well weren't exactly how they were describing and constantly repetitiously saying. And then they also used trauma programming because people were so traumatized. New Yorkers didn't know what they were seeing. A lot of family members died. People did not come home. The police officers were in shock. You use the trauma. Trauma is wonderful at compartmentalizing the brain. And that's how you use the MK Ultra, is you create a trauma response that compartmentalizes the brain and it takes away from all rationality. So anything that you're programming the brain with is going to be nicely nestled into the part of your brain that accepts it as truth. So they did a wonderful thing. And meanwhile, no one used the grants, and we don't want to even talk about the Pentagon, which was never hit by a plane. And at the time I had a friend who was working for the Navy and showed me the image of a missile launcher in the lawn turning directly at the Pentagon, one of their own missile launchers, who hit it. And that's why you never saw an image of a plane on the Pentagon. They never showed it to you because they couldn't show it to you.
Those are the energies that the 72 SEALs have in them.
Okay.
Only by knowing which SEAL, what these 72 SEALs is, they actually DNA codons.
Okay, go ahead.
Right? But when you know the energy frequency, when it's being used in the character spell, it'll stick out. Now notice they only put 5-pointed stars in all of the 72 SEALs. That's the reverse side of the coin. The other side is the sigil side. So the 5-point star represents Venus.
Go ahead.
Right? The aspect of the Great Mother that is her most seductive
Mm-hmm.
and her most loving,
Mm-hmm.
right? When she goes to the big mama aspect, the old crone, she's now seasoned, well developed in her mental perception of this reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now she's seated on the throne as the old crone, big mama.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In the beginning stages is the young girl on her fool's journey
Okay.
to become big mama,
Okay.
right? So they reenacting the story on the Blue House, which is signature of the Hiram key, Hiram Abiff,
Okay.
who was struck by 3 ruffians. Hold up. Yep.
Hey.
Hold on 1 second now.
Go ahead, handle your business. Yeah, that's gonna bring me to my next question that I got. That's gonna tie into this whole thing. Hey, if you're new to the channel, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. Hey, Rod, this gonna tie what you just saying. This gonna tie. Now, this is the big question because I wrote this one down, man. I pondered on it all day, and you just said a lot on this already, and there's a lot out about it. But it seemed like to me, based on my research, as I'm still learning and going back and finding other stuff, I'm always finding a woman breastfeeding a child, like it's a male child, right? Even when I go back to studying the reptilians, they got the reptilian breastfeeding the male child. And then you go to the Inanna one, the Black Madonna one, Nimrod and his mother. I mean, it's always all the storylines, Jesus and his mother, Cleopatra and her son. It's always the mother-son concept. But it seemed like to me some kind of way they reversed it and made it father-son. They took the mother out and then put the father-son concept and the breastfeeding connection. Could you go in a little bit on that, the mother-son concept? Go ahead.
That's where you get your Masonic Lodge, mother and son, mama trained the son. So in these depictions of this imagery, the woman breastfeeding the infant, but the father is always counseling a child. He's not never breastfeeding, right? He's standing either next to him or he's standing, kneeling down to talk to him. In our culture, the Roman culture is a little different. It's freaky. It's male on male freaky, right? So the original was the birth of Earth's great defender, Heru. Heru's status as the prince who's the heir to Osiris's throne, but there's one problem. His uncle Set is in the way. So Set in the way becomes Satan's way. So now he got to figure out, as the infant to the great mother, how do I get my mama her proper position back and take my father's throne as his redeemer? I had to get rid of Uncle Set. So we waged war, the Falcon, against Uncle Set, which is really the armadillo from the south of the United States, but that's a whole nother thing. The war between Horus and Set is a war for the throne of Osiris that Set usurped, right? So who Set usurped means under something, Big Mama Seat. Do you know somebody who sit under Big Mama Seat, Elder?
The Pope.
The Pope.
Yeah. Peter's chair. Peter's chair.
Yeah, but St. Peter's chair is at a whole nother church.
Yeah. Go ahead. Break it down, right?
They use that because Peter is Pater and Pater is Father. So the Pope is holding Big Mama chair for his father, Set, that set him as a Jacobin, an underminer, under her throne to put the circle around the throne to block her from getting back to her seat. right? So they show you the conjure magic part of it with the 72 stars in the uterus of the Great Mother, right? But here's the part, if you notice at the beginning, she's not dressed like she from Egypt. She's not dressed like she from Rome. She dressed like Queen Califia. Play the first 30 seconds again, Elder. Where y'all can see her, and then stop when you get on her picture and see if we can blow it up. Go. Okay, I just wanted to show that. I'm gonna find the picture while we talking, and then I'm gonna text it to you.
Hey, this is what I want to ask you too about. Okay, so we know about the mother and son going down to like the Mason son, the breastfeeding. The Pope is really going bowing before the mother and son concept behind the closed doors. Now this so we going into the closed doors. Now recently the Pope just opened these doors. What's your take on that, man? Because everybody got a different perspective on it. But what's your perspective on what the Pope got going on, opening these doors? Is it the end of the church, or is he opening up some portals? People asking all these questions. What is your take on the Pope opening up the portals?
The first part, I wasn't the Pope. I don't know who that dude was. Pope a whole android. It's two popes. The other pope, let me see, you got, was it Francis and Benedict, was it? Anyway, the one who was supposed to be resigned was the one who was left with the keys of power. No pope ever resigned because he had to match the church order. They got a name of the last pope as Francis, right? Francis is a robot. He been executed years ago for crimes against humanity and adrenochrome harvesting and child molesting. Right? He been gone. But that robot that they slide under the bed, they don't want people touching on him, so they have to hire an actor now. All that is to give us the illusion that it's business as usual when it's not. Because they don't got no more power at the Vatican. The sacerdotal seat has been claimed by the Great Mother. Right? When you seen Empress Redbird go in Philadelphia and sit in that state seat, that was the seat of government for the tribes. The collective of the tribes, with no tribe being better than another tribe. So that all of their grievances can be addressed with equity, with no favoritism. Because ain't no big eyes or no little U's unless you under the patriarchy, where they make some people better than the rest of the people. Big Mama don't play that. Right? So when she sat in that seat, they knew it was over. They knew it was over then, because now they didn't surrender the foundational document that they wrote up for their conquest called a loyal title. They already had to give her that. And then she went and sat in the sacerdotal seat. Right? Now, when she did that, it's game over, but you have to give the people's mentality a chance to catch up to the tribal events that's happening, coinciding with the government's events. Counter conjure. They now is responding to us because the counter conjure has been exposing the tribal oral traditional takeover, with many tribes being involved, playing different parts of the redemption, right? And it starts at 2012, what we call the long walk home or the journey home. I think one of Malachi's students named Mentuhotep was his name, who wrote The Journey Home.
I think that's his name, but I don't know for sure.
The Marcus Project, Journey Home.
Though, but I don't know.
We had to get that information out, right? Because at 2012, we needed to have a system in place in order for all of the tribes' leadership to have the opportunity to state their piece. Right. And when we go over the grievances of the varying different leaders, we find out why they in the condition they in, based on the war, based on the warfare that the people don't see. Silent weapons, quiet wars, world domination, warlords, violent whores. Blame the poor for trapping dollars on their own block, but the feds behind every single hot dope spot. They rock our communities with political homicides, and these crooked cops is telling us we need to law abide. But then they cover up these socially secret ass bastards, but the public can't see because they all good actors. Lifejackers putting babies in the state pen, getting raped and turned out by some grown ass men. The wrong that they in deserves hell's full fury, a black mass execution without a fucking jury.
Hey man, my next Rock, I got a list of questions, and these some hot joints, man. The next the next question we have for you, brother, is that we know that they told us that they brought us over here on ships. Shout out Dame Calloway, man, because we got that. I got that book. Story was told in reverse, in the covering on things. Hey, but we know that they told us we came on ships. Now, what was the ideology behind twisting us around to tell us that we came on ships if they really like the real guys that came over here? Go ahead, bro. Could you go ahead on that?
That's the conscious side of the war. That's the George Washington challenge, remember? At the end of 200 years, they supposed to have us so confused to believe that we from somewhere other than here. If we fall for it, they assert this is their domain and part of their territory, and they'll seize it because we surrender it. But if we know we Mississippi clay dirt walking, they screwed. Right? So they told us the story not only in reverse with false information, misinformation that served as a misdirection. Right? Truthful and factual information gave by unreliable sources. Fictitious stories laden with truthful concepts, ideas, and statements. Right? When you get there and understanding the zig and the zag, then you understand how they flip when they roll.